Good afternoon. This April 7th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Adjustment will now come to order. My name is Eric Moutz and I am the board chair. We'll start with a few initial announcements. First, due to COVID-19 concerns, this meeting is being held virtually. Information on how to participate in the virtual meeting has been posted on the Board of Adjustment webpage at www.boco.org/BOA. There will be an opportunity to remotely provide public comment on the subject dockets during the respective virtual public hearing portions of each item. And I'll provide instructions about how to do that when we get to each docket on the agenda. We'll now take a roll call of the Board of Adjustment members. I'm Eric Moutz. I'm obviously present. Sarah Weavenson.
Present.
Robert U. Kiley.
Present.
George Gerstle.
Present.
Scott Rudge.
Scott Rudge, present.
I would like to remind all the Board of Adjustment members to first, please identify yourself by name before speaking, and then speak slowly and clearly. All votes will be roll call votes, and you'll need to state your name and your vote when you're called on. Please be sure to have your video on as much as possible during the hearing, but remain on mute unless you're actually going to be speaking. When you do begin speaking, please double check that you have unmuted yourself and then identify yourself as Board of Adjustment member Scott Rudge, or as appropriate. It may be helpful for you to keep your participant list open in Zoom so you can see who is speaking. The person that's speaking should be bolded on your list. In terms of agenda items tonight, we have one agenda item scheduled for this meeting. At this time, I'll take the opportunity to explain the public hearing process. There will be an opportunity to remotely provide public hearing on the subject items during the virtual public hearing portions of each item. The order of presentation will be first that we'll hear from the county staff, then from the applicant, and then we'll accept public comment from any individuals who wish to speak. Some people may have signed up in advance, and we'll call on those people first in the order that they signed up. If a person that's attending the hearing did not sign up for public comment, you can sign up in the chat function of Zoom. Please direct all of your questions and comments to the board during your allotted time. The chair will direct any questions that arise during the hearing to the appropriate party. Once we are satisfied that we've heard all relevant public testimony, the public hearing will be closed and the board will then discuss the merits of the case and come to a decision. Any members of the public will have a chance to speak, even if they didn't sign up on the Board of Adjustment webpage beforehand. Once those who have signed up in advance have spoken, I will call for any additional members of the public to speak. If you join by computer, please sign up by submitting your first name, last name, address, and docket number in the chat box to the right of your screen. As each person who was joined by computer and signed up to speak is unmuted, Zoom will adjust your participant status so that you can speak and be seen by video. Once you finish speaking, Zoom will place you back in the room as an attendee. If you dialed into the meeting via phone, please raise your hand by pressing *9, and we will unmute you and call on you to provide comment when it's your turn. When it's your turn, the system will request that you unmute yourself with *6. Once you are unmuted, either via computer or by phone if you've called in, please state your name and address for the record before providing comment. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes to speak, and a timer will beep at the end of your speaking time. Please do not submit comments or questions in the chat box during the meeting. The chat box should only be used for public speaker sign up only. Please remain on mute when possible. The moderators will mute you if we see that your connection is the source of any background noise. Members of the public will not be able to share their screens during public comment. Applicants, please have your presentations pulled up and ready to go. I'll announce when we're ready for you to present, and at that time, you'll be able to share your screen. I will now open the public hearing on docket VAR-21-002, Ray addition and setback. We'll first hear from the staff. County staff, will you please state your name and present the staff report?
Hello, Ryan Sarek, Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting Planner. We are going to share my screen here. Make sure I do this correctly. Okay, are we able to see a nice gray screen here?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So this is Boulder County Board of Adjustment, April 7th, 2021 hearing for variance 210002. This is the Ray addition and setback at 11170 Flatiron Drive. The applicant and owners of the property are Keen and Kelly Ray. The property zone rural residential. It's 0.86 acres in size. And the request today is for a variance to adjust the front yard setback from 25 feet to a 20-foot front yard setback. We're located sort of, well, east of 287 near Erie, some portions of Lafayette. The parcel is in the Brownsville subdivision, and it is zoned rural residential. The parcel's relatively flat. These are 2-foot contours for this parcel, and the comprehensive plan does not list any elements or any mapped features of the comprehensive plan on the parcel. Here's an aerial of the parcel. This is the residence that we're going to be discussing today, and the primary focus of this meeting. So we'll start with the parcel history. As we saw in that aerial image, this parcel has a single-family residence constructed on it. Building permit, or BP 71-14891, was a building permit for the construction of an approximately 704 square foot addition to the existing residence, which was shown on the plans. This is just by multiplying 24 by 36 as being 864 square feet above grade. It's also the size of the basement that's on the parcel as well. That building permit listed a setback of 50 feet, front setback of 50 feet from Flatiron Drive on the building permit. Now that, as we said, they didn't include any dimensions or anything like that here on the building permit. They listed that the rural residential front yard setback in 1971 was 25 feet. It's the same as the setback is today in 2021. This comes from a survey. It's a little more accurate here of the existing residence. You see a 25-foot front setback from the front parcel line that runs along Flatiron Drive. The residence, that addition we looked at in that building permit, is the portion of it in the setback is here. The red line being the setback at approximately 20.5 feet from the front yard line. So the applicant came in for a site plan review last year, a proposal to construct a 1,791 square foot addition to that existing residence. This graphic, what's in blue is roughly what the existing residence is, and what was proposed is kind of this that's not shaded in blue up here. The applicant had proposed a 1,599 square foot second floor addition right on top of the residence, and then some addition, approximately 200 square feet to the first floor, and covered porches that aren't in the setback and not part of this discussion here. A portion of that proposed addition, sort of located here, and we'll see in the next couple slides, is proposed in the setback. So the applicant is asking for the setback to be adjusted, the front yard setback. This is at 25 feet where this red line is, adjusted to accommodate that existing residence, which will accommodate the addition approved by SPR 200077. So sort of digging into that proposal that came through the SPR, here we can see the setback running through the garage. This is about, the applicants measured it out, this is about 16 square feet. This little triangular corner here of the garage that's located in the setback. So anything on this portion of the screen would be in the front yard setback, this portion out of the setback. So this triangle is what's existing in the setback. And then this shows the proposed second story addition. This would be the floor plan for it. Again, showing where that setback runs through. I think that's running through the shower or the proposed bathroom facilities with the master bedroom being proposed to be above the garage. We'll look at these pictures here. It's this corner of the garage, 16 square feet cut into there. This is what we're talking about as the area that's in the front yard setback. The proposed addition, again, you can kind of see that here, the proposed addition would be above it. The applicant has stated in their application materials, I think we'll hear from the applicant about this in more detail as well during their presentation, that really in order to build the addition proposed through SPR 20077, the applicant would have to go through pretty significant additional engineering costs to construct that second story addition as they had proposed, not as much as if they are unable to build in the setback, primarily because they would need to shift roof truss off of load-bearing walls that are built in the setback right now, sort of requiring a more expensive design than what they had proposed, and lopping off a portion of that second story addition that they proposed as well. So that's what has been proposed. What we're looking at and considering is if that can be, if that second story addition can be allowed in the front yard setback or not. This was referred out, like all other variance applications are, to all applicable referral agencies, and all in the neighborhood was also noticed of this application. We received referral responses from a handful of agencies, including our building safety and inspection group, which noted largely standard comments of building permit, plan review, and inspection approvals would be needed for the addition. I included the Boulder County floodplain referral response on here. This parcel was in the floodplain. The applicant, though, as a part of the SPR application, or not a part of necessarily, but submitted with the SPR application, a new LOMA, which showed the structure removed from the floodplain. Boulder County floodplain looked at this and agreed with the LOMA and found that an individual floodplain development permit is not needed for this application or for that SPR. Development review team, engineering and access also reviewed this. They had no concerns with the variance as a whole. They did note that the addition is an urbanized area, which requires a stormwater quality permit. Again, this is something that is handled at the time of building permit application. And then we received a number of no comments or no conflict from other referral agencies, and we haven't received any comments from the public. So Land Use Code Section 4-1202 B2A, this is the variance criteria that we look at for all variance applications. There exists exceptional or extraordinary physical circumstances of subject property, such as irregularity, narrowness, shallowness, or slope. The property is 0.86 acres. It's approximately 124 feet wide, so east to west, running parallel to Flatiron Drive, 124 feet, and then 300 feet long, north to south. The property is flat, as we saw on that contour map. It doesn't feature any physical circumstances like rock outcrops or water bodies or anything like that. That would limit or influence the location of development. Staff finds this criterion is not met. Moving on to B, because of the physical circumstance, the strict application of the code creates an exceptional or undue hardship upon the property owner. I included the aerial here just for visual, again, noting the size of the parcel, the relative flatness of the parcel. There does exist developable area, probably particularly to the south of the residence, where development, in addition, something like that could occur. Because the staff finds that this criterion is not met. Moving to C, the hardship is not self-imposed. The proposed addition involves the least amount of disturbance to the site and utilizes the existing residents most efficiently. We're not looking at needing to break new ground for an addition or requiring an extension of driveway or extension of access to get to different parts of this parcel, the applicant is proposing to remodel and then do a second story addition to the existing residence. In order to build that addition as proposed, the applicant right now would have to remove a portion of the existing residence and redesign the foundation to support that addition. Again, like I talked about a little bit earlier, making that more complicated than the applicant has proposed and just using what's existing there. Because the applicant is pursuing the most efficient and least impactful method of addition to this property, staff finds that the hardship is not self-imposed because the applicant's pursuit to sort of follow along with these goals of efficiency and lowering and reducing impact to the property. So therefore staff finds this criterion is met. Moving on to D, the variance, if granted, will not adversely affect the use of adjacent property as permitted under this code. The proposed addition is a second story addition. It causes the least amount of disturbance to the site for an addition of this size. There's no conflicts with the use of adjacent properties anticipated. We've not heard any comments of the variance. Staff found no conflicts through SPR 200077 during the review of that SPR. So staff finds this criterion is met. Looking at E, the variance, if granted, will not change the character of the zoning district in which the property is located and is in keeping with the intent of the code and the Boulder County Comprehensive Plan. Like I said before, staff does not anticipate, both through this variance application review and through the review of the site plan review, I said review a lot there, through the site plan review, staff found this proposal will not change the character of the rural residential zoning district. I found it to be compatible with the neighborhood, and found no conflicts with land use code outside of the proposal to build within the front yard setback. The staff rec listed a number of these goals. I have them here too. I don't know if I need to read through all of them, but there are a number of Boulder County Comprehensive Plan, BCCP, residential goals, plans planning area, housing element goals, sustainability goals in support of this type of addition, mainly not deconstructing an existing residence to build new and not putting an addition in a different area than where it's already been disturbed. Because of all this, staff has found that this criterion is met. And then looking at F, the variance, if granted, does not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Boulder County and is in accordance with the comprehensive plan and any applicable intergovernmental agreement affecting land use or development. And no adverse effects to the health, safety, and welfare of citizens have been identified by staff. Staff finds this criterion is met as well. So the recommendation is that the Board of Adjustment deny docket VAR 210002 Ray addition and setback because there's no exceptional physical circumstance that created a hardship, and the hardship is not exceptional or undue. If approved, recommended conditions are included here, including all relevant building code requirements must be incorporated in the building permit plans, and all other future development is subject to applicable permitting and setback requirements. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, staff. I appreciate the presentation. Are there any questions from the board members for staff?
I have a question. This is Board of Adjustment member Sarah Webenson. I think for me it's hard to understand, if we can go back, the one of the first slides that staff presented talked about how in 1971 the setback was the same as it is today, 25 feet, but on the permit it's 50 feet. And I'm just wondering if you can explain that a little bit, and also to help us understand the discrepancy that if the setback was 50 feet, how was the permit issued allowing less than that 25-foot setback?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure why they wrote 50 in here. The side yard setbacks are 7 feet as well. So if you notice on the slide, it says 20 feet on it, which would, if it was 20 feet, would, be different and cause issues as well. So I think what was written in here was what the person applying for the building permit wrote in. My guess is that they were looking at measuring the front from the middle of the road. That's probably approximately 50 feet from the middle of the road to where this addition was going to be at, but those aren't like the official zoning setbacks. I'm not entirely sure what the intent of it was in 1971 with what this is written on there. I look at a decent amount of these, and frankly, it's amazing that they wrote anything in on some of them sometimes when you read through the older building permits. So I think the 50 is probably their attempt at saying how far they had it set back from the road, but that's the best guess I have to that. The zoning district, as we have here, it was a front yard setback of 25 feet in 1971.
So does that mean that the applicant was granted a variation from that 25-foot setback in 1971 to be able to do that?
The applicant wasn't granted a variance, but the applicant was granted this building permit for this to be constructed. Now, if it was done in error, that happens. It appears that it was, but there was no variance granted for this in 1971.
Yeah, this is Kim Setches. I might add in. So, these older permits weren't looked at as sort of comprehensively as some of the building permit reviews are in today's time. So really, we took the word of, what was on the permit at face value. And on this permit, they indicated that they were 50 feet from the front line, which would have met the 25-foot setback. So per what they wrote on the permit, they were in compliance. It appears, however, that it didn't get built that way. So that is what presents the situation that we're in today and why they need to seek a variance in order to build the second story.
Okay, so the assumption is that it was not built to the way the permit was approved. And
Correct. And there is some responsibility that the county bears on that, and that there was a final inspection that was issued for the permit. And so, at that point in time, it may have either been difficult to see, or somebody just didn't catch that it was indeed not the 50 feet that was indicated on the permit. But the permit was issued with the understanding that 50 feet from the front lot line was the distance that the plans were going to be built. Does that help?
Yep, that's my only question. Thank you.
Mr. Gersel, you can just speak up. You don't need to be called on.
Thank you, George Gerstel, Adjustment Board member. To be clear, what would help me is would the proposed addition increase the setback violation, or is it just make it the only addition is vertical? It wouldn't increase the imposition on the setback. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it would increase the amount of building into the setback, just because the second story addition, this triangle that my mouse is hovering over, would be in the setback. However, there's no expansion of the footprint of the home into the setback. There's no expansion of square footage out from what's already been built into the setback. So it's just on top of what is there in the setback.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, Scott Rudge, Board of Adjustment member. This would be a problem regardless of where the applicant was building. If a building permit is pulled or applied for, and there's building in the setback existing, the applicant would have to apply for this variance or tear down that corner of the house. Isn't that correct?
Not necessarily. So if the applicant were to propose to build somewhere different on the property outside of any of the setbacks. And it didn't involve, this has got structural components involved to it here. So if you were to build a detached shed in the backyard, not in any of the setbacks, you wouldn't be expanding that use into the setback. You wouldn't be kind of furthering any of that along. So we wouldn't require variance for a project like that.
And if I can give you some language related to that, essentially we have what's called a non-conforming structure.
Right.
So it's a structure that doesn't comply with the setback regulations. And if I can read that excerpt from the code, it basically says a non-conforming structure is any existing structure which does not conform to the structure regulations of this code for the zoning district in which such non-conforming structure is located. As a result of either one, the adoption or amendment of this code, or two, a final county administrative or judicial decision precluding Boulder County from enforcing this code specific to a structure on the basis of this estoppel or waiver. And basically what the regulations say is that a non-conforming structure may not be altered, repaired, or enlarged in any way that would increase the degree of non-conformity with respect to the setback or height regulations of this code. So, as Ryan was explaining, they can't rebuild over the portion that already encroaches into the setback. And staff is sort of finding a soft denial on this because we think there are other areas where they could build and meet the setbacks. However, we do want to recognize that there is an encroachment of the existing structure that is in the setback already.
Okay. I understand your interpretation with this application.
Are there any other questions from the board for staff?
I had one other. This was not in the presentation, but it was in the packet, and maybe you can explain to me. You did explain in the that the applicant had received a LOMA to demonstrate that they're not in the floodplain, but in the packet the plat showed that other than the structure, and that LOMA was for the structure itself, not for the entire property, my understanding. The plat showed that most of the south part of this property was in the floodway, which was different from the 100-year floodplain. Does that restrict his ability to build? And it seemed like the house had been positioned exactly to stay out of that floodway and to remain in the 100-year floodplain only. Is that was that examined?
No, not necessarily as a part of this variance, just because the variance is for what's been proposed is the above addition. Go ahead.
It goes to your contention that everywhere else on the plot is buildable. But I don't know what the building policy is in the floodway and how that's different from the 100-year floodplain in terms of building restrictions.
Yes, more restrictive to the floodway, that you really shouldn't build on the floodway unless, I guess, that's the only option you possibly can have. Building in the floodplain would need an individual floodplain permit, like what I mentioned from the floodplain team's requirements, or additional permitting to secure that kind of permitting. So yeah, 100-year floodplain is, I suppose, less restrictive than the floodway would be.
So if the desire not to build in the floodway was the reason for the hardship, would that affect your analysis of number 1 and number 2? Or A and B, I should say.
Those are always sort of tough questions. Just, we don't have that proposed here. I guess it's not a part of this application, so it wasn't anything that staff looked at or reviewed as a part of this variance.
I wanted to note, this is Larry Hoyt, the counsel to the board. I would note that that's page 15 of the staff rec packet.
Right. So it must have been examined.
Yeah,
I can-
it was included in the application materials and examined by staff. Again, it wasn't a part of this analysis because there wasn't any proposal for building in a different location than where they have. Staff did examine the floodway, and especially as a part of the SPR too, and didn't find that there was going to be any significant impacts to that. And again, the LOMA showing the structure out of it, that's what staff relied on as a part of this application. So no, that wasn't a part of necessarily part of staff's analysis here for this variance application. It can be something that can be considered. It just wasn't as a part of this one.
Okay, I don't have any other questions.
So one more question, and I apologize, but could you pronounce your last name for me, Ryan, so I don't butcher it?
Yeah, Kasarik.
Kasarik, okay. So, Mr. Kasarik, building on Scott's question, do you think that the location of the floodway here ought to have been considered when evaluating whether or not there are physical characteristics of this property that make it a hardship for the applicant to build in a different location?
Yeah, that definitely can be something that is considered as a part of this analysis. Like I said, that wasn't a part of what staff analyzed because it wasn't what was proposed. The LOMA removing the residence out of, or the structure out of the floodplain was considered as well. I know that this floodplain mapping in this area is a little off, or maybe not the most current flood mapping that we have out there, but it wasn't considered there as a part of staff's analysis.
Okay. Are there any other questions for staff? And if not, we'll move on to the applicant.
Actually, this is Summer Frederick, and I may just jump in here and show the floodplain map and give, oh, except
Sure.
I can't show while Ryan is still sharing his screen. But I will say that there is a large portion, as the commissioners have, or the board members have pointed out, there is a large amount of floodway on the parcel. However, there is also area on the parcel that is in the 100-year floodplain outside of the setback where additional development could be placed or could be developed. So, you know, while there is a large amount that is the floodway that development needs to stay out of, there is still area that could be added to the house that is outside of the setback.
Any other questions?
Scott Rudge, Board of Adjustment member. If you take the setbacks in the 100-year floodplain portion of the property, I question whether there's really that much more available property to build on. That's just my own opinion. I don't have it surveyed, but it's a significant amount of the property that's in the floodway rather than the 100-year floodplain. And most of the 100-year floodplain, it seems to me, by looking at page 15 of the board packet, is occupied by the existing structure.
And
that's my eyeball.
correct. And so when staff would look at that, staff would consider, since it is a single-story structure that exists on the parcel, staff would consider, you know, where the structure sits right now as area for potential development, because as the applicant has proposed, they could put, not only could they expand the footprint of the existing structure somewhat, they could expand the footprint of the existing structure and add a second story. So
Okay.
that's how we typically look at those situations.
Okay. The analysis of I'm sorry, Scott Rudge, Board of Adjustment member, the analysis does not seem to point to other ways to configure the second story. It seems to point to other locations on the property that could be developed. I'm done, Eric, with my questions.
I think
Any
Ryan,
other
Mike, could you clarify if the site plan review approved a second story, just to reiterate this, what I think happened is that the site plan review approved a second story addition, just not in the corner that encroaches into the setback. Could you
That's correct.
reiterate that? Okay.
Yes, the site plan review approved a second story addition, just not that portion in the setback.
And the applicant is seeking to actually have the addition also encroach into that portion that goes into the setback. So that is the crux of the issue. The entire, they want something different than was approved in the site plan review and would like to be able to encroach into the setback as the house does.
That's correct.
Any other questions for staff? We'll now move on to the applicant's presentation. Applicant, are you here?
This is Anna Milner, staff. The applicant's been promoted, just waiting for him to join.
Okay.
We are here. Can you hear us?
We can. The floor is yours for your presentation.
Great. It's nice to be able to talk, and thank you all for all your comments so far. My name is Keen. This is my wife, Kelly, and I feel honored that we're the only reason that you all are meeting today, and we appreciate your time. I wanted to start by thanking really the Boulder County planning team for all their support and guidance through the process. We've now worked with Ryan, Summer, Katie, Nathaniel, and they've all been great to work with, and we appreciate their help. I think Ryan did a pretty awesome job of putting this analysis together, and really spent a lot of time, and it's very thorough, and I appreciate that. I wanted to touch on a couple things. The items A and B of the criteria that Boulder County staff said we did not meet. I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit more clarity into what Kelly and I were thinking in terms of why we applied for this variance. So I'll share my screen here. And if for some reason my volume cuts out on my mic, just interrupt me and let me know. Usually I have my headphones plugged in because I have this issue. So if for some reason the volume drops really low, just let me know and I can put my headphones in. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen now? Yes. Okay.
We can.
So again, to refresh your memory, criteria A, there exists exceptional or extraordinary physical circumstances of the subject property, such as irregularity, narrowness, shallowness, or slope. It seems, when the planning department looked at this, they kind of looked at it a little differently than Kelly and I did. They were interpreting the subject property to really mean only the land or the topography of the lot, excluding any structures. I can understand this interpretation if we were only talking about a lot that didn't have anything built on it. But we purchased this property with the existing permitted structures as they are today. And Kelly and I are both in real estate, and the term that we've been taught and like legally referred to a property is the term real property. And so that's kind of how we interpreted this criteria. And if you look at like the term real property is the land, everything permanently attached to it, all of the interests, benefits, and rights inherent to the ownership of real estate. Real estate is defined as land at, above, and below the Earth's surface, including all things permanently attached to it, whether natural or artificial. This is a different term for real property, but it basically says the same thing. It includes structures, buildings, roads, sewers, fences, and all of that. So when Kelly and I looked at this definition, we believe that in 1971, when the property was permitted, the structure and the current house became part of that real property, if you will. And therefore, when we looked at this criteria, we believe that there's clear exceptional physical circumstances of our property that are irregular. And that is being that our property was built within the setback. And we believe that is irregular to this neighborhood because from what I can tell, the other homes and properties on the neighborhood are built adhering to the setback. So that's kind of in our minds how we went through this variance request for item A there. I kind of just said this, so bear with me. Yeah, like I said, for our interpretation, we believe criteria is met because there is an exceptional circumstance of the subject property and that our property is regular to the rest of the neighborhood. Item B here, because of these physical circumstances, the strict application of the code creates an exceptional or undue hardship to the property owner. I wanted to elaborate a little on this and kind of go back to the application that we submitted because I just want to touch on the points that we feel are very important to us and why we feel it was undue to us. So I'm going to jump over to the application real quick here. So again, here's the criteria B, talking about undue hardship on the property owner. There's really numerous reasons why we feel this is an undue hardship. First, by not allowing us to build a second floor structure in the setback, we are no longer able to utilize the existing permitted foundation walls that are original to the house. So strict adherence to the setback in this circumstance would add significant complexity to the structure of our home in order to avoid 16 square feet of second floor area. Further, the second floor structural solution would then focus a lot of weight on a very specific section or sections of our foundation. And instead of being able to spread out the load evenly, we would basically have to reinforce the structure in specific locations to miss this 16 square feet. Secondly, removing the square footage creates an issue with our interior layout, and it eliminates space for our master shower, kind of like Ryan showed there. And since this is a pop-top project, we're limited to just our foundations that we already have. And so finding the right layout of our home was really difficult. And we went through a lot of different variations to find the optimal fit. And if we had to stay out of the setback, we're not just looking at doing a diagonal wall across the house. You'd want a rectangular bump out in there. So you're actually taking 33 square feet out of the house, which totally eliminates the master shower, eliminates a good portion of where we were going to locate our toilet. And it's hard for us to find a way to reconfigure that. And thirdly, we believe this creates an undue hardship by enforcing the setback because it just really creates an odd look to our home. Basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to balance, if we were to have to adhere to the setback, we have to balance having a good look to our home and also having a workable interior layout. And we looked at this with our architect quite a bit. Actually, we've already spent quite a bit of money to look at different options here, and none of them look very good because our house basically has this one, like in the front, has this one very long flat wall, which we're breaking up with a front porch. But then all of a sudden it would have one bump out. And just no matter how we did the architecture, it just didn't look right. And it's also, this corner of our home is the closest to the street, obviously. That's why we're asking for the variance. But so an odd condition or an odd look right here, you're going to be able to see it from both ways coming down the road, and we're worried. Yeah, it's the most visible from the road, and we're worried that would impact our resale value and our property value and kind of the look of the neighborhood, where we feel like we have an opportunity to really make a nice looking house on a pop-top project. And then to the planning staff assessment, Just wanted to reiterate real quick. This is basically the staff was talking about that they agree that what we're trying to do is the most efficient way to build a house on top of the permanent foundations. But they were saying that there is room on the property to build elsewhere, and I think you guys also brought up really good points about the floodplain, and we've factored that into our thoughts as well as we looked at where to build this house. And when we looked at, the floodplain kind of comes in through here and comes right past the house. And so when we looked at where could we expand and how could we also get our ideal layout to our house, it was really difficult. If, we looked at expanding back here, we looked at expanding here, but we quickly get into the side setback, and we'd have to have this goofy angular shape to our house here instead of nice square rooms like you typically like to have. This is also where our sewer line runs out of the house, and it's a shallow sewer line. It's not a full depth underneath the basement. It comes out halfway at the basement. So that would require a lot of reworking to run that through new foundations. This is also one of the areas on our house that has egress to our basement. And so we didn't want to be covering up an egress window from our basement as well. So it was really difficult. And so our whole the goal for our project was to be able to get all of our bedrooms in the same location and then have a separate living space. And really the best way to do this from a cost standpoint, from a sustainability standpoint, and from layout is to go straight up. And we really do feel like that's the best option that we have here. Oh, and yeah, so that we have these 3 beautiful crabapple trees on the east side here. And so if we were to, 25 years old, and if we were to expand out this way, I would really hate to tear those down. So I kind of went off my script here. I apologize, but let me. So these are basically the points that I just hit from a cost-effective and efficiency standpoint. Building our house up makes the most sense for us. It allows us to achieve our ideal layout, and then it's the most sustainable approach, and it's also the most energy efficient approach, because if you're building straight up, the heat from the first floor and the basement and the first floor will go up to the second floor instead of having more area of house to heat and the heat escaping through the roof. So because of our interpretation of criteria A and what we looked at is in terms of real property, we believe that we satisfied not only A, but also criteria B. And that's why we submitted this variance request, believing that we met all of the criteria, not just the last couple. And then I do appreciate all of your input on the floodplain there, because that does severely limit where we would be able to build or would like to build on our property, because we're kind of shoehorned into this corner here. And then one other note is that we can't just go and build anywhere on our property. Again, I'll go back to this map because we're on a septic system. So this is not a sewer system. So our septic system sits right back here. So if we were to expand the home backward into the back of the property, we would have to then relocate our septic system and our leach field. And one of our goals of the project is to maintain our current septic system, just because it's cost prohibitive to create a whole new layout for that.
Mr. Ray, thank you for your presentation. Do any of the members of the board have questions for the Rays?
Yeah, hey Eric, I had just a couple more. Sorry, I was just trying to get
Oh,
my
I thought you were done. Sorry.
if you don't mind. And so I wanted to go back to, in closing, when we bought this home, it was fully permitted, and our assumption was that it met all of the necessary setbacks as part of being a fully permitted home. And Kelly and I bought this. It's a little tiny ranch. I mean, it's 1,000 square feet ranch, and we bought it when we had one little girl who was 1 year old, and now we have two kids who are almost 8 and almost 6. And we have outgrown this property. And our whole thought when we bought this was that someday we're going to stay here forever because we love this lot and we love this property, and we would build onto the house in some way, shape, or form. And we've been saving for 7 years, and we're finally at the point where we can make this dream a reality and make this our forever home. And you know, most of the people that are building in Boulder County are building these gigantic houses and mansions, and we're not doing that. When we're finished here, our house will be about 3,500 square feet. So we're not building something gigantic. And if we have to cut out 35 square feet from our bathroom, that does create significant impacts for us. So it might seem like it's a really minor issue. But to us, it's a really big deal in terms of us spending more money on redesigns and getting our ideal look and feel of our home. So we hope that you will take that into consideration as you think about this project. And then again, I just wanted to thank you all for your time and Boulder County Planning's time, because they've spent a lot of time with us on this project and especially with this issue. So now I'm done.
Thanks, Mr. Ray. Questions from the Board of Adjustment members?
Scott Rudge, Board of Adjustment. And Mr. and Mrs. Ray, thank you for your presentation. Did you have a survey done on the property when you bought it?
We did not. We inherited a survey which Ryan used in his presentation. That was from 1997, and it did, here, I'll share my screen again. It did show this is just a snapshot of it, but it did show, actually it didn't actually call out this exact dimension. Wait, no, it did. It called it out at 20.5 feet, but this was done in 1997 by the previous owners of the house, and they were just kind enough to give it to us. But again, we didn't, I figured the setback in the front was 20 feet, not 25 feet.
Oh, so those dashed lines were not part of the survey. Those are superimposed.
No, sir. Yeah, all this, and the dashed line is superimposed on the drawing.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board?
So the survey only gave you the dimensions of the property lines.
Pretty much, yeah. I think the homeowners before us got this survey in order to permit the barn that they have back here.
I see.
They built this a year or two later.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is George Gerstle on the Board of Adjustment. A quick question on the summarizing in my mind the conversations about where the floodway is mapped and the floodplain is mapped and where your septic system is. That seems to preclude a significant portion of your property that's available for modification with a new building. Could you point again where your septic system is approximately in Leachfield? So that would restrict where you could build also, and that you can't move that into the floodplain, I believe. It'd be great if staff could verify that, but that essentially just leaves the area to the, I guess it's to the west that would be available for any changes.
Yeah, it's right here.
Is that okay? That's where it is. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Hearing no other questions.
I have some questions.
Okay, please go ahead.
This is board member Kyle. Thanks for your presentation. And thanks to the staff for their presentation. I had some questions about that definition of real property that you shared. That where did you get that definition of real property?
Well, my wife is a real estate agent, a realtor, and she had learned that in class. Is my microphone dropping?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was saying my wife is a real estate agent, and when we were putting this together in her classes, she remembered the definition of real property. So I looked it up on the internet, and I also checked in with our attorney who specializes in real estate, and they confirmed we had the right definition, at least.
Okay, so that definition does not appear in the Boulder County Code. Is that correct?
I couldn't speak to that. I don't know.
Okay, and with your application, you submitted a letter to the Board of Adjustments rather than filling out the hardship statement form. Do you feel like that letter is still accurate?
Yeah, I believe it's still accurate. I wanted a more robust response than a couple of lines to help you understand our situation. And it wasn't until I got the staff's recommendation back that it dawned on us to think about the real property and like define that actually. So that, yeah, I would have had that in our thought process, but we didn't get it in there.
Okay, thanks. And then, I don't actually think this is relevant, but because you brought it up, I just had a couple of questions that I was curious about. It looks like in the design that the bathtub and the shower are separate in your proposed design. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a shower and a bathtub.
Okay. And then the area of the property where the 25-year-old crab trees are, do you believe that the floodplain prohibits you from building in that area?
I wouldn't want to build in that area because that's the lowest area of our property. And so when we looked at the analysis of our project, then absolutely we didn't want to cut down our crab trees and build in the lowest area that is in the floodplain. That just didn't seem like the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. But my question was, is there a restriction building there because it's in a floodplain or a floodway?
There would be a restriction, but our LOMA, I believe, might let us build some portion in that area. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, thanks. That's all the questions I have.
Are there any further questions for the applicant? Hearing no other questions, and typically we would now move to a call for public testimony. It does not appear to me that we have anyone signed up to offer public testimony. So unless staff chimes in and corrects me, we will move on to final statements or clarifying statements by the staff. And then we'll close the public hearing portion of the hearing and have a discussion by the board. Final comments by staff.
Staff does not have any other comments to add.
Okay. That being the case, we'll close the public portion of the hearing and open the floor for board discussion.
Eric, this is board member Scott Rudge. I find that criteria A is met because staff contends that the buildable area on the property is limited to the second floor, or putting a second floor on the existing structure. And since the existing, that to me, in my mind, that makes the existing structure part of the consideration for building that second floor. And so if you're limited to building a second floor on the property, you have to rely on the cornerstones of that structure and the foundation of that structure. Otherwise, in my opinion, it becomes an undue hardship, meaning that criteria B can be met. In light of those two findings of mine, when it's appropriate, I'd like to put in a motion to grant the variance to the applicants on this VAR 210002.
Thanks, Scott. This is Eric Mouts. Are there any other members of the board that would like to comment?
Yes, this is board member Robert Ukielny. I don't find that criteria A is met. I have not heard any. The criteria is that there's exceptional or extraordinary circumstances of the property. The applicant proposes that we change the language of the provision to say real property rather than property, but that's not it's not our responsibility, or even it's not allowed. We have to take the language that has been provided to us and apply that. And the existing structure is not a physical circumstances of the property. And what we've seen in the topographical map and figure 5, which also appears on PDF page 11, is that this is basically a flat property that can be built on, and that it's the evidence before us is that it's not in a floodplain. There was concern about cutting down crabapple trees, a non-native species that are 25 years old. But that there's nothing to dispute that the extra 16 square feet could be put there. There's no physical circumstances stopping that. So because I don't think criteria A has been met, I think that we should disapprove the variance.
Board Member Weebenson, I'm wondering if it's still possible to get clarifications from staff at this point about, the floodplain specifically and what the board member Rudge mentioned setbacks from the floodplain. So if we could get some clarification on what those setbacks would be from a floodway.
Just for clarification, this is board member Scott Rudge. I wasn't referring to setbacks from the floodway. I was referring to setbacks from the property lines on the other three sides. When you take the floodway out behind the house where the crabapple trees are, and then the 25-foot setback on the front and the 7-foot setbacks on the sides, it leaves very little buildable flat ground in the property to build on. And I think, and staff is free to clarify this, staff has said that when they made the determination on A and B, criteria is A and B, although what's written is that the rest of the property is flat, they said what they evaluated was a second floor and not the ability to build really elsewhere in the property boundaries. That's what I heard. I'm not convinced about that, but that's what I heard is their clarification of their analysis.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
I can hop in here, Ryan Sarek, Community Planning Permitting staff, to answer your question. And what I'll do is pull up real quick on my screen here too, so we can see just what I'm talking about. It's better to do that than speak. So this is the LOMA submitted by the applicant. So this is the letter of map amendment submitted by the applicant that came in to us first with the SPR and then through the variance. We can see the outcome. What is removed from is the property, property being 1170 Flatiron Drive. So this is the LOMA that was submitted. The setbacks on the property are 7 feet from the sides, 25 feet from the front. I don't have the rear off the top of my head, but that's not what, I guess the question wasn't asked there, or what we're discussing here. So staff looked at the property, the physical circumstances of the property as discussed and as noted in the staff packet, found that there were areas that could be developed. We've heard testimony and about the developability of that outside of just the physical circumstances and things of that nature, but staff looked at this LOMA along with the rest of contour maps and site visits and things like that in looking at criteria A. In setbacks from, there is no setback from floodplain either. I think there was kind of a question about that. There, you know, it's in general best to avoid floodplain if you can avoid floodplain, but there isn't a set code criteria for you need to be X square feet away or X feet from a floodplain boundary.
Okay, thank you for that. And is there a difference between what can be built in a floodway versus a floodplain? I think I thought I heard Summer saying that you could build in the floodplain portion of the site.
Yes, so you can build in the, for how this map was prior to this LOMA, the property had a 100-year floodplain on it. It also had floodway on it. 100-year floodplain would still require a floodplain development permit of some type, but could be developed on. Floodway could not be.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, Ryan? If this, since they have a LOMA, does that mean there are no floodplain related constraints on building anywhere on the property?
This LOMA removed the property from the floodplain.
So there are no floodplain related constraints
There's
on this property.
no
at
floodplain
all.
development permit needed, no floodplain.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Scott Rudge, Board of Adjustment. Is there a distinction then between floodplain and floodway, or is the map on page 15 irrelevant to our discussion?
Yeah, so the map was submitted as part of the application materials. It is part of what was provided to staff. This LOMA adjusts to what the floodplain is in that on this property.
So it applies to the floodplain, what's marked as floodplain.
Floodplain and floodway.
And floodway, okay.
It applies to the property. The property is not
Okay.
in the floodplain or floodway.
Okay, thank you.
And
Sorry.
if I could just step in for a second, one quick comment. I just want to remind the Board of Adjustment members that the variance request is related to a specific building permit. And that building permit proposes a second-story addition over the existing footprint. So the applicant isn't proposing anything outside of that footprint. Staff approved a second story. They just didn't approve the full second story. It restricted the second story to the area that is outside of the setback. So that's the issue that's in front of you, is to see whether the full second story that the applicant wants, which isn't in compliance with the approval they received, can be approved, just to simplify things.
Scott Rudge, Board of Adjustment. Ms. Sanchez, I understand that, but the staff analysis extends beyond just putting a second floor on the structure. The staff analysis says the subject parcel is flat and does not feature any significant topographical physical circumstances. Given the size of the parcel and lack of significant physical barriers to development, staff finds that there are no exceptional or extraordinary physical circumstances of the subject property. Therefore, the staff finds this criterion is not met based on the flatness and the size of the property, not based on a second story to that property. And I would submit that we have looked at many other applications in which a large portion of the property is in floodplain or floodway, and we've deemed those areas to be unbuildable, and have deemed that then criteria A could be met. So I was establishing based on that statement written by staff and the map on page 15 that shows floodway. And the first question I asked was, is there a difference between floodway and floodplain? And the answer was yes, that you would not build in floodway. Now that's been clarified. And so now I understand that the entire property is exempt from floodplain or floodway considerations. That's not the information that was given first. So I apologize for dragging that out.
And that's exactly why you're here as a board member, is to, interpret these criteria under your own perspective and have the deliberation that you intend to have. So sorry if there was confusion from the staff report, but we look forward to the Board of Adjustments analysis on the same criteria.
And I'm going to interject here. I think, and it was my mistake to allow this without a motion to reopen the record, but technically speaking, we ought not to be having additional statements from staff during board deliberation. Staff, we had an opportunity to question staff. Staff had an opportunity to make their statements. Unless we reopen the record, we can't, in all fairness to the applicant, turn board discussion into a colloquy with staff without giving the applicant some time to make their statement. So I want to really focus the board members, rather than asking questions to staff, on our, I think we have more than enough information in the record to make a decision. We need to discuss among ourselves what we think should happen here and vote, and keep our activity focused on the board discussion and vote we need to have. If it's the pleasure of the board to reopen the record and take testimony from or take additional statements from staff, we could certainly talk about reopening the record. But until we do that, I really want to keep us focused on our discussion among the board members.
And Chair, if you could, we do need to give the applicant a chance to respond, since staff did chime in.
100%. And so in light of the fact that the county has had an opportunity to to comment during board discussion, I'm going to give the applicant a couple minutes to make a short statement in response to the things the county said. I'm going to keep this very short, 1 or 2 minutes, and focus so that we can get back to talking amongst the board members about what needs to happen with the variance. So applicant, would you like to make a statement?
The reason that we sought the LOMA is because we had talked to the floodplain management group about our ability to build anything in the floodway or the floodplain. And we were basically told there is no way that you can build anything in that space. So therefore our only option was to go vertical anyway. So but we wanted to be able to have any options to us. So when we got this LOMA, yes, that was an added benefit that we submitted with the packet here. I would like to say that we bought this home in 2014, 1 year after the 2013 floods that occurred in Boulder County. And from our understanding from the previous property owners, the property did flood basically along the lines of the floodway that you see in the map on page 15. And then in 2015, we experienced a pretty good rainy season. And in May, towards I think the end of May, the property again, we experienced a similar flooding event right along. It wasn't terrible, but it was right along the boundary of that floodway again. So LOMA aside, the property is flat, it is low, and our neighbor to the west has a creek that runs through their property, and that's what swells and jeopardizes ours. So I don't feel like building in any area other than above our house would be a prudent course of action.
You think I would learn by now. Going back to board discussion, I'll throw in my 2 cents, which is that I'm inclined to, to approve the variance. Historically, we've looked at a lot of different properties around the county over the years that I've been on the Board of Adjustment, and often there is another place on the piece of property where you could build. In fact, it's almost always the case that there's another location on the property other than where the applicant wants to build that you could build if you spend enough money, if you spend enough time, if you took enough trouble to do it. And I don't view the criteria 1 and 2 as requiring that what the applicant wants to do be the only possible solution to building on the property. I interpret these requirements more as meaning that if the conditions on the lot are such that there are limited opportunities to build, and so the applicant's hands to some extent are tied, and other options available to them other than what's being proposed are disadvantageous enough that they amount to an undue hardship. And so when I look at a project where there are multiple alternatives, and one of them is a less resource intensive alternative of building up as opposed to building out, or a more structurally sound alternative like building up and not having to redo the foundations of the house. I put a lot of weight in the extra resources and money that building around county regulations can sometimes cause someone to have to spend. And I don't think that the interests of the county or that the interests of the code are served in a safe case like this, where we're asking someone to do a lot of extra work or build something that really doesn't make sense because of a setback, particularly when the county approved, by error or however it happened, the location of this property when it was the location of the house when it was built. I will say that, in terms of interpreting the definition of property, we always consider the location of the house on the property and as part of the circumstances of the application. You can't do it any other way because there's a building there. And, when you're talking about what constitutes an undue hardship, absolutely, if you can't pretend the building isn't there and focus on lot characteristics in the absence of conditions on the ground. And I'll say that, historically, without exception, every time we are given a variance like this to consider, we take that into account. I would find that what the applicant wants to do is a reasonable response to lot conditions. There is flooding risk. It's a long, narrow lot. And what they're proposing to do doesn't appear to me from a policy perspective to undermine the integrity of the land use code or have any effect on the public or neighboring properties. So taken together, I'd be inclined to approve the variance. But I'm interested in the opinions of the folks who have not spoken up. So Ms. Weavenson, Mr. Gerstle, it's your turn to express your opinions.
Yeah, this is Board Member Weavenson. I think the challenge, just so the applicant understands what's put before us as the board, is we're given these criteria and we've been instructed to consider them in order. And so if you don't meet criterion A, you don't proceed to an evaluation of criterion B. So I think, just so you understand, that's why we're really stuck on that first one. And the physical circumstances, I think ironically, now that I understand the LOMA, that you've been taken out of the floodplain and out of the floodway actually reduces the physical barrier to your being able to build your project. So I think you do meet many of the other criteria. I think the undue hardship, the way the setbacks, the building was permitted originally to establish that footprint that was approved, but we really have to decide on that first physical one. And I guess I'm leaning towards saying that it does not, because the only physical hardship, sometimes there's giant rocks and drop-offs and different things going on these sites, that because you do have a relatively flat site, and if I'm understanding correctly that the floodplain and floodway are no longer an issue, I also do not see the physical hardship there. I think I heard my fellow board member Ukaili pointing out that the only part of that upper story that's encroaching is the shower. And I am looking at it and seeing a bathtub, and you could still use the existing foundation walls and notch in that bathroom and maintain the toilet area and the bath area. So not that we're designing your project, but I do see that there is a possibility to still meet the setback while proceeding with a slightly modified design and not having to move load-bearing walls and things like that. But I only mentioned that just as a comment. But I'll stop there. Thank you.
This is a board member Gerstle. It's been an interesting process listening to the conversation here. It seems to me that there is hardship if we were to reject the proposal, and that whether there's a LOMA or not, there is apparent significant flooding risk, and then also would be that's out there, and it seems like it's a regulatory issue that isn't, really, the fact that there's a LOMA, the county issued the LOMA, makes the regulatory argument less strong that there is an extreme hardship. I am convinced by the conversation or the commentary by board member Mounts about the view that this, if we reject this, it would be inconsistent with some of the sustainability and green building policies that are in the comprehensive plan, though they are not apparently a regulatory issue that we can address right now. And that if we would reject this, it would require a significant rebuild and more expensive, more resource intensive building that was contrary to some of the county policies. So that's the struggle that I go through. But the final one is thinking through what's the purpose of a setback. And this would not increase the physical setback on the ground. It would would continue it in terms of elevation. And I wonder if, when I think of it, a reason for a setback is largely for safety issues, and going up, increasing the vertical imposition on the setback would not really affect this, increase this, or affect the safety aspect of the setback. So those are some of the thoughts going through my mind as I listen to the conversation.
This is Board Member Scott Rudge. Chairman Mouts, what's the procedure for asking for referring to council? As the chairman, a year ago, I used to do it freely, but now as a board member, I'm not sure what I should do.
We can, I believe, move into a private session with the Board of Adjustment Council if we would like to do so, to ask him a question.
I don't need a private session. This is a matter of public record.
Okay.
If I may I ask Larry a question?
Yes, Scott. So there are two types of questions. I mean, sometimes we find it useful to confer with Larry in private to get legal advice that we want to keep confidential. If what you want to ask is a matter of, you're comfortable asking it as a matter of the record, I don't have an issue with that. Larry may advise us that he doesn't recommend that he answer the question on the record, but if you want to ask him, go ahead, and we'll see what Larry says.
This question relates to the letter that the board wrote to the Planning Commission asking for remit on the on environmental and conservation types issues to add as part of our evaluation. We have done it without their permission. We've asked for their permission in a public letter, and I don't believe that they've responded either in either direction, affirmatively or negatively.
Well, that's correct in terms of there's been no final action taken on the request for special exception authority of the board. We did make that request last year of the county commissioners via the Planning Commission. And I am told just in the last few days that the staff is actively working on a set of criteria for a special exception authority. That doesn't mean it would necessarily get approved, but it does mean that it is in process. So I can answer it that way.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we've all had a chance to express our views on this variance. I'll remind the board members, especially the new board members who may not know this, but in order to approve the variance, we need a vote of 4 out of 5 of the board members that are present. So a simple majority does not approve the variance for purposes of this proceeding. Would anyone like to make a motion one way or another?
This is probably my faulty memory. This is board member Scott Rudge again. Sorry. Eric, is the 4-to-1 criteria for appeals of the decision of the staff and not for variances? I thought variances were 3-2 and appeals of Dale Case's determinations were 4-to-1.
The state statute and the county code require a majority of 4-to-1 in order to approve a variance, as well as.
All right, sorry, my mistake.
Okay. Well, would anyone like to make a motion?
Eric, I'll resubmit this, Scott Rudge, board member. I'll resubmit my previous motion that the board approve the variance VAR 21002, subject to staff's conditions. All relevant building code requirements must be incorporated into building permit plans, and all other future development is subject to applicable permitting and setback requirements.
Okay. Do we have a second for that motion?
George Gerstle, board member. I'll second the motion.
A motion has been made and seconded. We will now take a roll call vote. Mr. Ukele.
Opposed.
Okay. Mr. Mouts, I will vote in favor of the motion. Mr. Gerstle,
In favor of the motion.
Ms. Weavenson, Ms. Weavenson, what is your vote?
Oh, sorry, I'm unmuted, but maybe you couldn't hear me. I have to oppose just because I don't think they've met the physical criteria.
Mr. Rudge?
I'm in favor. Scott Rudge
Well,
in favor.
well, a majority of the board did vote in favor of the variance. It does not pass because it did not obtain the required 4 votes. So that concludes our hearing today. I want to express my appreciation to the applicants for showing up and being prepared and presenting their case, and to county staff for doing the same. Thank you for all of you and as well as my fellow board members for being here and giving your time and attention to this matter. This concludes today's hearing of the board adjustment.
Eric, could I, in the further business portion of the agenda, could I just note that I did send to the board, this is Larry Hoyt, the counsel to the board. I did send the board the decision of the Colorado Court of Appeals in the Save Our St. Green Valley versus Board of Adjustment case. That matter was determined against the Board of Adjustment and also against the land use director's determinations, as well as the real party in interest, which was Martin Marietta. And therefore, basically the mandate has not issued yet, but once it does, any appeal that the Board of Adjustment would decide to take would have to be taken within 42 days of the date of the mandate. So that would mean perhaps next month we would be determining. And so I'd really ask that you review the decision and decide whether or not the Board of Adjustment itself has a particular interest in appealing to the Supreme Court. The land use, what's happened with the decision is that the Court of Appeals has effectively remanded the entire matter back to the land use department and to the land use director, or excuse me, the director of community planning and permitting. And so that may, well, if there's no appeal, that's where it will go, is back to the community planning and permitting director for another decision.
And I don't know if the other board members have had a chance to read the opinion or not. I'm certainly happy to continue the meeting for a few minutes and discuss it if anyone is interested in doing so. I'm also happy to defer discussion until the next meeting, assuming we'll have a May meeting. What's the pleasure of the board?
This is Robert Ukele. Unfortunately, I have not had a chance to read it, so I wouldn't feel like I'm in a position to make any decisions. Larry, when did you send that to us?
I sent it, I believe it was on, it was either Friday or Saturday, I believe. It might have been Monday, sorry.
This is Scott Rudge, board member. Larry, I noticed on the list of people you sent it to that James Greer was included and only one new board member was included.
Well, that might explain it then. I'm sorry about that, Robert. I'll make sure you're in the group email.
Thank you.
This board member Weavenson, I guess I'm curious also what is being asked of us, if you could clarify, because it sounds like we'd need to wait on the director's decision first and then it would come to us, or is this an opportunity just to answer questions prior to that?
Well, actually, if you do nothing, then in fact, it will go back to the community planning permitting director. However, the opportunity now with a deadline of 42 days from the date that mandate issues, which will be sometime in the next 12 days. If you decide that you do not like the decision and you want the decision to be appealed to the seek certiorari from the Colorado Supreme Court, then the board would have to act to do that. Obviously the county itself has been handling the appeal on behalf of the Board of Adjustment, given that the Board of Adjustment agreed with the land use director's determination. I have not heard, but I don't believe that the county is itself interested in appealing to the Supreme Court, but that's, it's still up to you to make your own decision, so.
I can tell you one of the board members who was there and voted with the majority against Martin Marietta. The chance of me voting to pursue an appeal is next to zero, particularly because the Court of Appeals more or less adopted the views I articulated at the hearing as my reason for voting against Martin Marietta. So but all of you will need to make your own determination as to whether whether the board ought to independently appeal. I'm not interested in it, but I think a majority would carry the day. So.
This is
George
Scott
Gerstle.
Rudd. Go ahead, George, please.
Yeah, just a clarification. So we could answer that question at the next board meeting. There's time if we wanted to continue that discussion.
We could, and of course, you also have the authority. Both the chair of the board and the director of community planning and permitting have the authority to call a special meeting for that purpose as well. So.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is board member Weavenson. I know it only came into my inbox yesterday at 2 p.m. So I would appreciate more time to be able to read the full documentation of why it was overturned.
Sure.
This is probably Larry, if we waited until next month and just totally hypothetically, we did ask to file for cert, would you have enough time to prepare it?
I would not be preparing it. It would be the county attorney's office that would be preparing it, given the similarity and the fact that the county and the Board of Adjustment were essentially on the same side in that matter. So I would not be preparing it, but I would think it would be a fairly simple matter to do the petition for cert within the time remaining.
Thanks.
This is Scott Rudge, board member. I'm the only other board member who was on the board at the time, Eric and I. And I would say we voted 2-3 in support of the planning staff. So it was not a overwhelming. It was an underwhelming lack of majority in favor of upholding the director's interpretation. And from what I cursorily read, the grounds that the two of us voted to support the director were the grounds on the precedence of the permit owner who was burning tires. That was the precedent, and the judge has disagreed with that. It's a precedent, and if that's the specific ruling of this judge, then I have no reason to appeal that. So although I didn't agree with Eric Mouts at the time, and he's vindicated in his opinions, I would not have any interest in appealing this on behalf of the Board of Adjustments. I do have one question. If we do defer this until next month, then that'll become part of the public agenda, and we're likely to have Save Our St. Vrain Valley as part of our proceedings next month. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I'm not asking you to take action this evening because it isn't something that's been noticed, and any action that you take would have to be noticed. So.
Okay.
And
I guess then it's next month.
Well, and the other option we have is, if we don't have other business next month and I don't call a special meeting, or the director doesn't call a special meeting, then we don't take any action, which effectively results in in no filing of an appeal, right? The default posture is if we don't respond and file something, we have not appealed. And so I think if we're going to have a meeting on this issue, it would be because we have enough board members or several board members who are interested in filing an appeal, such that there's actually a reason to meet and debate it, rather than just allow our opportunity to appeal to expire. So I certainly, I would be hesitant to have us all in again next month for a hearing just to deal with whether we file this appeal, but we'll do what we have to do.
Well, let me just note that it would not require a public hearing. It would be a public action. So you would have to be engaged in a public meeting. We can conduct a public meeting such as that by email when there's not a public hearing involved. This is does not require a public hearing. This is simply a matter of decision of the Board of Adjustment.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. I mean, in that case, I suppose we can, why don't we give everybody an opportunity to read the decision who hasn't read it? And perhaps we can have a discussion by email and decide whether or not it makes sense to file an appeal.
Very good.
Fine with everybody? All right.
Could you also send us the briefs?
I will ask the county attorney's office to do that. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that concludes all of our business for today. So unless, Larry, if there's anything else, I will conclude the meeting. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.